Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm your host Annie, and today with us we have Ayanna Thomas, who is a professor and dean at Tufts University and also does research on memory and metacognitive science. Yeah, so could you please just introduce yourself a little bit and what do you do? Yeah.
My name is Ayanna Thomas. I am the Dean for Research in Arts and Sciences at Tufts University. I'm also a professor of psychology. I
Mhm.
study memory and metacognition across the lifespan. I am also the current editor-in-chief for the journal Memory and Cognition and the current president of the Spark Society, which is a nonprofit organization that was formed in 2018 to support the networking and mentorship for scholars in cognitive science and cognitive psychology from underrepresented minority groups.
Yeah, that's really cool. So why did you choose this career initially?
Geez. So the career I have now is not the career I thought I was
Uh-huh.
going to have. When I was in college, I got interested in I got interested in thinking about becoming a professor in
Mhm.
psychology. And my model for becoming a professor was very much like the models I saw when I was in college.
Mhm.
And those folks, those faculty, those professors, were people who taught some classes and did some research, and that was really appealing to me. I really got interested in studying memory and really thinking about the kinds of ways that memory breaks down and fails and why it fails and where how we can sort of support our own memories. So I had this sort of deep interest in these research questions.
Mhm.
um, but the career I have now only sort of partially deals with that.
Mhm.
I don't spend a lot of time in the classroom. My job has transformed. That being said, I do still spend a lot of time with my laboratory and doing research, and
Uh-huh.
so that element of that core interest remains. But all these new things, um, new opportunities developed, and they aligned with my interest that changed over the years.
Yeah, for sure. Why do you think truth is so important and why do you think misinformation is such a big issue right now?
Hmm. Truth. Truth's a tricky concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, I can't. Let me start with the easier part of that, the
Mhm.
misinformation part. I think that there's a lot of research that suggests that the way people learn information is happens in such a way where we will learn a piece of information, but sometimes forget where we learned that piece of information. So we forget the source.
Mhm.
So there's this binding of the information to the context. And if
Mhm.
we remember the context, then usually we can make some assessment as to whether that context is reliable or not. And I think that misinformation and the sort of spread of incorrect information, especially in social media, has become very prominent recently because we are naturally prone to forgetting the source of information we learned. So this is not new, right? This is how
Mhm.
memory works. And so that spread of incorrect information is something that I think was apparent, 10, 15 years ago. But what wasn't around, 20 years ago was these social media platforms that allow information or disinformation and misinformation to be disseminated quickly and rapidly. So
Yeah.
we're regularly inundated with information, and we don't necessarily engage in all of the cognitive processes that would result in a really sort of robust memory representation for not just the piece of information, but also how where we learned it. So if
Mhm.
I read what's a disreputable source, I'm trying to think of that. I'm on Twitter, right? And so Twitter is I have I spend a lot of time on Twitter, and I know different groups of people have different platforms that they like to spend a lot of time on,
Yeah.
and it's really interesting to see that sometimes a piece of information will just be put out on the platform, and I'll see it and I'll be like, oh wow, and I will believe it
Mhm.
without checking, right? And so I think we're also less likely to check on things, especially when we're looking at things quickly.
Mhm.
So I think that misinformation has always been something that's important.
Yeah.
I just think that it's become really salient in our current time because of how quickly it's spreading in the context of the technologies that we use.
Mm.
What do
Yeah,
you
that
think?
makes sense. Um, yeah, I agree with like the speed that like information can spread. So, yeah, both correct and incorrect information that can spread like really quickly. Um, and yeah, and also I've also read some stuff about uh like wrong information. Some of them like sound really like crazy, but like it sounds interesting. Like so like if you like make up like a crazy number and then like it sounds like, oh, that's so like that's so crazy, so you're more willing to like you're more likely to like click on the article or whatever.
Hmm.
And then so like it's yeah, it's kind of like a it grabs attention better maybe
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah. So that's sort of like the clickbait, right?
Hmm.
The what is gonna get clicks, what's gonna get people to engage,
Hmm.
um, and really sustain attention. And that sort of outrageousness of it is it's interesting. So it's sort of like, and it also sort of facilitates conversation, right? It gets people to chat, and then get more people to sort of think about the thing. I read recently in a study that um, misinformation that was spread across the Facebook platform was
Hmm.
actually only spread from a really small number of people. So
Hmm.
so that's like another, I think, interesting facet to the whole spread of misinformation and disinformation. Not everyone's engaged in it, or at least in the spread of it. We might be exposed to it, but
Hmm.
the actors that are perpetrating the spread of information are actually few, at least according to some of the data I've come across.
Yeah, yeah, it's also really interesting. Um, would you say there's a lot of misinformation in like your field, like psychology and cognitive science? Like, would you say so? If so, like, how do people like in the field try to like avoid or tackle it?
So I think that you can think about that question from a couple of different angles.
Hmm.
So one angle, and maybe this is the one you meant, and you can tell me. One angle is to think about how the average person, the general population,
Hmm.
thinks about psychology and thinks about psychological conceptions. And
Hmm.
from that perspective, there's a lot of misinformation. People hold a lot of myths
Hmm.
about psychology. It's really
Yeah.
strange.
Oh yeah. Like I've seen on like social media like psychology facts and like sometimes just that sounds
They're
crazy.
they're terrible, right? Like they're completely wrong. So they really frustrate me. Um, one of the ones that always frustrates me that pops up
Hmm.
a lot in the popular zeitgeist is, and in movies and things like that, is that we only use 10% of our brains. We
Hmm.
use 100% of our brains all the time.
Oh.
It is a myth. Of course,
Hmm.
we're not using just 10% of our brains. We'd be zombies walking around in the world. It's a
Yeah.
crazy thing, but yet,
Mhm.
yet this is like a very popular myth that seems to persist over
Mhm.
decades and decades. Um, so psychologists, like people like me who go and talk to people like you, can start to address these things, right? And we can engage in these one-on-one conversations. We can also engage in more sort of public facing dialogue. um, so podcasts have become really popular, and
Mhm.
a lot of psychologists I know have gone on I don't know if you're familiar with the Hidden Brain podcast.
Mhm.
It's one that features a lot of psychologists, and it's really great because it's just another way for scientists to communicate with just the average person in a different
Yeah.
medium, to sort of combat some of those myths about using 10% of our brain.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
there's also like but there's another way to think about that question, right?
Mhm.
And the other way is, do we are we right? Or are we sort of perpetuating our own misconceptions and
Mhm.
misinformation within the work that we do?
Mhm.
And I think that's an interesting perspective, because in some sense, yeah.
Mhm.
I think that and this is not just psychologists. I think that science, all scientists, all scientific inquiry has this particular issue that we always have to grapple with.
Mhm.
And the issue is, how are we biased in the way that we're conceiving the questions that we're interested in,
Mhm.
and how are we biased in how we're trying to answer those questions and the evidence we're looking for.
Mhm.
People tend to Everybody tend to seek what's called confirming information. We
Yeah.
suffer from what's known as a confirmation bias.
Mhm.
So if we have some hypothesis, we think something is some way,
Mhm.
we end up, when we are looking for evidence, we always seek the evidence that's going to confirm the hypothesis,
Mhm.
and we don't look for disconfirming evidence.
Mhm.
And from that perspective, because we have this natural bias, humans have this natural bias,
Yeah.
um, we all are sort of, we all fall prey to perpetuating misconceptions. If that makes
Mhm.
sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like writing when I like write essays and like I look for the evidence to support like my thesis, but then there's also evidence like going against that. Sometimes I have to like address those too. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, and sometimes, when we're sort of looking, especially when you're building like a program of research,
Mhm.
you sometimes just think, you're just sort of like so excited that you
Mhm.
found the confirming evidence that you
Yeah.
don't even think about, hey,
Uh-huh.
but what about these other alternative explanations? And so
Mm.
I think that that's another way to perpetuate, unknowingly, misinformation.
Yeah, yeah. For sure. So what do you think like the worst type of misinformation is? Like about what?
Hmm. Hmm. Geez, I don't know. That's a hard question. Um, I think anything that's going to do harm.
Mhm.
So, misinformation around public health issues, that does a lot of harm,
Mm.
right? And so I think that I don't know why people perpetuate it.
Mm.
It's sort of against the public good.
Mhm.
Um, I think that I spend a lot of time, and in fact, I'm leaving on Monday to go to Reno. Where do you live?
Illinois.
Oh, you're in Illinois. So
Yeah.
I'm in Boston, and
Mhm.
I'm going to Reno on Monday to testify in court about misinformation as it affects eyewitness memory. which
Mm-hmm.
is sort of a different kind of misinformation, right? But it's still the same way that how memory is distorted and how we tend to come to believe things that didn't happen. And I think that that's also a problematic form of misinformation because the consequences of, let's say, misremembering the past because some other thing has been suggested to you
Mm-hmm.
can result in someone spending decades in prison, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think anything misinformation when it has these sort of real world consequences
Mm-hmm.
uh, are really problematic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree, yeah. Um, so I know you kind of like talked about this like before already, but what do you think is there like a best like one best way to like eliminate or avoid or reduce misinformation? Yeah.
Yeah. Avoid is hard, right? We can't avoid it in the way we consume information right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we, as consumers of information, when we spend time on social media, what's a social media platform you spend time on?
Instagram.
Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how information is spread on Instagram.
Sometimes
Stories?
they have like text posts, so instead of like pictures of people, they put like text on it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny, but I think that we just have to be a little bit more critical of the information
Mm-hmm.
that we are consuming, right? And
Mm-hmm.
really thinking about what it is that people are saying and where they're getting that information from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, TikTok's another one that I see a lot of misinformation getting just sort of passed around on, and
Uh-huh.
I'm like, why are people even buying this into this, right? But I
Yeah.
think that you sort of like question your sources, be critical, and I think that's like the best advice I could give people is like really just don't passively consume.
Mm-hmm.
We're an active consumer of the information around us, and that means that we should be actively engaged in it.
Mm. Yeah. Um, so I think that's all my questions about misinformation. So just for fun, do you have a role model, like either professionally or like just in general?
A role model. I have a professional role model, but you wouldn't know who she was. So
Mhm.
let me think if I have a role model that you would know. Hmm. I have no one. Oh my god. No one you would so there's this researcher, and her name's Saparna Rajaram, and I read her paper when I was in college, and that paper really just transformed my life.
Mm.
And to be honest, when I read the paper in college, it was kind of boring,
Uh-huh.
right? And you're reading this paper, and I'm like, okay, I'm really kind of, but then I couldn't stop thinking about it, and
Mm.
I thought about it for decades.
Mhm.
And then when when finally became friends with this person, it was sort of like really exciting for me. She doesn't even know. We're just friends now, and she doesn't even
Mhm.
know I feel this way. And like I read this paper when
Wow.
I was in college. But yeah, so no one you know, but I think that she's just such a brilliant researcher.
Mhm.
She is so she does such a great job of communicating
Mhm.
the research that she's doing,
Mm.
and I just admire that about her.
Yeah, for sure. Um, just to close this out, do you have any advice for people, especially like teens? Um, could be about anything.
Yeah, sure. I got tons of advice.
Mhm.
um, don't stress out too much.
Mhm.
Like things are hard and the world is challenging, but every day there's so much fun to be had that
Mhm.
we should always try and have like a little bit of fun every day. Doesn't matter what we're doing.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Yeah, for sure.
I try and live that life.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so I think that'll be it for today. Thank you so much for this. It was really fun talking with you.
It was nice meeting you, Annie. What year are you?
I'm a junior.
And are you thinking about college?
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of. What's your favorite class right now?
My favorite and best like subject would be math. Um, I'm thinking of going to like something related to biology,
Hmm.
but yeah, I really like math though.
Well, there's computational biology.
There's that,
So
yeah.
you can blend the two fields.
Yeah, that's a smart idea. I'm gonna consider that, yeah.
Well, I wish you the best. What's this project for?
This is just like my personal, like outside of school project. Um, I don't know, I just try to talk with like people from all kinds of fields, to get like different perspectives and like to learn things and hopefully like spread like what I learned and yeah.
How do you disseminate the information? How are you going to spread it?
Oh, I post them on like my channel on YouTube and then yeah.
Cool. And last question for you.
Mhm.
How did you find me?
Oh, I think I try to search for people from like all kinds of fields and then I will have to look and check. I'll get back to you on that. But
Okay.
yeah, uh usually I use Google Scholar and then um I don't know. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that. But yeah, I'm glad you like gave me this opportunity.
Yeah, it was great chatting with you. And yeah, if you have any other questions about anything, if you're thinking about computational biology, just let me know.
Uh-huh. Yeah, of
All right.
course.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Bye.